Welcome, Margaux. It's a great pleasure having you for our interviews in the context of the Venture Leaders 20 years anniversary. It's been 20 years we're taking teams abroad, and you were one of our Venture Leaders in 2022 with Enerdrape, from which you are the co-founder and CEO. A company created in 2021, actually, so the year after you are already exploring international markets. Margaux, welcome.
Thank you, Jordi.
It's a pleasure having you. And what I'm doing here is entering, and we want to learn more about your experience 5 years down the road. What have you learned about this international market, starting with the strategic dimension? I think companies like yours are looking at the international market, but what gave you from the start the international dimension, or at least what did you look at? What were the strategic considerations to grow? And maybe directly linked to when we were you looking at different markets? How did you apprehend these questions of growing internationally?
Yeah, sure. So actually for us, I would say it was clear from the start that Switzerland would be quite a small piece of the market for us. It was really clear from the beginning that the technology that we have developed can really be applied more or less everywhere on the planet. We are turning underground space into renewable energy sources for heating and cooling in building. So we need heating and cooling more or less everywhere on the planet. There is underground infrastructure more or less everywhere. So the application and the use case was quite clear that it was worldwide, and we will have to scale in any case, and it's a matter of volume as well for a clean and hardware technology like ours. So that was, very clear from the beginning. Then in terms of strategy, where to go, why to go to a specific place and so on. So first, really the idea was to, let's say, benefit from our credibility in Switzerland because we are a spin-off from EPFL and so on. So to first grow in Switzerland because we also know the market, we know the people there, we had the network and everything. And then we map where we could go. Europe was from the start one of the biggest markets we will have. Also due to the regulation, we are really into also clean energy, so decarbonization, energy efficiency, or a clear regulatory framework. I would say ambition that we have in Europe. The price of energy as well and the disponibility of energy in Europe is rather limited depending on where you are. So here we could really add a great piece, let's say, to the energy puzzle there. So that was the first view and the first strategy we had. And
If I may ask, Europe being quite wide, I mean, because actually it's several countries and you mentioned
yes.
regulatory, was it something that you considered all of Europe and it was quite homogeneous in terms of regulatory, or did you find more specificity in looking at this market?
Yeah, there is some specificity. One key aspect that is quite a challenge as well for us is really that we are really at the in-between construction and the energy sector. And in the domain of energy, you have more or less, I would say, quite homogeneous regulatory framework. Although really in terms of implementation and scaling and really the operation behind, in terms of construction, there is very, very different culture, different value chain, different people, different ways to do it, depending on the country you're operating. And this is something that I think we kind of underestimate at some point, that there would be, that we were like, okay, we are building buildings the more or less the same way everywhere, but actually that's not the case.
You mean regulations to be in a garage is different actually in every country, whereas energy is quite homogeneous, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes it's a bit weird because it's the output we gave, and really in terms of energy, it's really homogeneous everywhere. Yeah, the regulation are the same, but the way we have to install the garages, the underground basement structures and so on, this is regulated in a very different way depending on the country.
How did you address those points, if I may ask? Did you take experts, or did you just really develop in-house knowledge, or how did you focus your effort? Just what were the impact of this in your scaling?
Yeah, so actually I think we were a bit opportunistic in a way. So for example, first we did our paperwork, so there was the paperwork. Okay, Germany is going to be a key market for this and that reason. France is going to be a key market for that and this reason, and so on. And we had our plan, like in that year, we're going to go to this market. In this year, we're going to go to the other market. And that was really our paperwork and what we were supposed to do. But then there are opportunities that just come by. And for example, so I think it was 2024, we had a call from a very big and well-known energy company in France. They were looking for a solution. They were looking for geothermal energy in a garage, and they just like found us. And if I was looking at my plan, it was a bit too early. We were supposed to enter this market a bit later. And we say, okay, no, there is the demand. They're looking for something, so we just go for it, and we will see. So we learn a lot in house, and we learn from the terrain, and yeah, it took a bit of time, but that was the way we did it.
Strategically speaking, we discussed Europe, where we often mention, or the companies are often mentioning, of course, the US and Asia. When it comes to energy, I mean, the whole globe could be yours. So what were your considerations beyond Europe?
Yes, indeed, we also consider Asia and the US in particular. I would say not necessarily US, but North America. That we know there is also some opportunity there. Actually, we are already engaging discussion. We learn in-house. And now, for example, we really understood that we need experts and we need some external support for this kind of market, because things are really regulated in a different way. And the culture of construction is also very different from the one we have here. And also the challenges, they don't have the same price of energy, they don't have the same type of pressure, or at least not at the same pace. So the technology remain the same, but the USP and the value proposition can really be different depending on this market. And what we learned is that it takes so much more time. You can sell, I don't know, 10,000 units in Europe and be a leader in Europe. If you don't sell 1 unit in the US, 1 unit in Asia, you're really beginning from scratch. And this is something that, we learn along the way. So we do have some traction. We do have a discussion for example, with Japanese actors for quite a while. It takes time to go through. You're not there. You don't know the culture. You don't know the players there. You really have to structure a specific team of experts that is on site. And this is sometimes one of the difficulty you have for expanding, I would say, really out of Europe. For example, now we have sales, we have partnerships in France, and we can do the things from Switzerland, it's okay. But doing the things from Switzerland in the US, we tried to do it for the last 2 years, but now we really understand that, okay, now we really need a team there if you really want to push the market there.
What have you learned on the ground, on the field, that operationally maybe you were expecting and not expecting? I think one of the things you mentioned is really important to be present. But were there other things that you discovered once on the ground, whether in European countries, whether in North America, that you thought, wow, this is really now something, or I don't know, what was the hardest or the funniest anecdote that you experienced when doing this?
Yeah, and that's hard. Something quite funny is sometimes it's about the language, and that's like something very specific to France, because we are French speakers, so they tend to forget that Switzerland is another country. And because yes, you speak French, so they assume you know the French regulation, and sometimes this was hard because we had some funny moment where they're talking about some specific rules or acronyms or things and process that are very specific to France, and we're a bit like, okay, but we are Swiss and we don't have that actually in Switzerland, so we don't really know what you're talking about. And there's always an equivalent. It's just like a naming or something. But we had some funny moment like that with the French players we are discussing with. And for the hardest thing, I would say, sometimes some of the hard is the time, the time scale. You're a startup, a young company, you want to be fast. We tend to say that in Switzerland we are not very fast, which is true, but actually there are some other countries that are very, very slow as well. And yeah, and this is the hard thing, that you have to really build a relationship, specifically when you go abroad. Yeah, because you have everything on the paper and it's okay, but then it's not sufficient, you know. You have to really to build the relationship. They have to know you, they have to come, they have to see the installation, because they're really gonna take you from abroad to their own industry, their own country, their own market. So you really have to build this relationship, and this is very interesting and can be also very powerful, but it's a lot of investment in terms of time and resource. And this, I think, we kind of underestimate how long it can be. For example, I remember having some actors in Asia who contacted us, and when they contacted us, it was like 2 or 3 years ago, and even like 3 years ago, and I was like, yeah, but we are not ready to go in Asia, and the person was saying, yeah, but you know, it takes time, so from the time you will be
Let's start
ready.
today. By the time you are ready,
Exactly. And this now it's becoming to be a bit frustrating, because we are 3 years later, we are more than ready, and we are still, you know, building the relationship. So
I think that's a key lesson, and particularly probably in your industry, which is actually, as you say, that the interface of construction and energy starting very, very early, even when you're not ready. I think that's one thing we have often heard from entrepreneurs. I'm continuing just quickly. I think it's for me, when you look now at the next steps, I mean, maybe you want just to wrap up a little bit where you stand today, and how do you see now some of the key strategic decisions coming up, the lessons that you are leaving the people with. We heard about starting early, preparing everything in terms of regulations and partners. I think all of these things are really essential. Anything else that you would say about where you stand today with Enerdrape, and where you look at the next steps to think, hey, really, let's make sure those foundations are solid for those who are also building their companies today?